Hello and gesundheit, everybody. That's going to be my new catchphrase. No, not really. But anyways, what we're going to do today is a new edition of Urban Legends. Urban Legends. And for us, Vegas, being an urban city, there's one legend we're going to start with. And I'm starting with this one because there's just so much drama and there's so many things that were related to this person while he was alive, and even now that he's not alive. And some of them, we might have to debunk because there's sort of truth and fiction, this kind of thing. And that's good old Bob Stupak. So Bob Stupak is the guy behind the Stratosphere, or what is now currently known as the Strat. And so before it was the Strat, Bob Stupak had Vegas World on there. And before it was Vegas World, he actually had some kind of gambling museum that burnt down after like a year, sadly. And then he sort of reinvented it. He built up Vegas World, and then ultimately he transferred Vegas World into what's the Strat now. But he was also famous downtown, and that's where he kind of started his journey in gambling. He was responsible for the Glitter Gulch and the Vegas Vicky, not Vegas Vic, that was taken, but he built his own Vegas Vicky. And there was a few other businesses that he was associated with, but he was quite the character. In fact, if you had the good fortune to go into Vegas World back in the day, there was always some gimmick going on in there. I mean, it was tremendous. The girls that he used to kind of work the slot machines and the different coupons that they would offer for winning and not winning and redeeming and not redeeming. It was almost like a carnival in there. Ultimately, Vegas World became the Strat. And before the Strat became the Strat, Bob Stupak had all these fantastic ideas of how he wanted the Strat to roll out. By the way, I haven't gotten to the whole urban legend. The urban legend is Bob himself, and then the story of one of the bets that he made, a very famous bet, one of the most famous bets ever made in Vegas. We're going to get to that in a second, but I kind of want to give you some history, some atmosphere that goes along with, so you can kind of get a feel for what this guy was about, who this guy was. So Bob Stupak was, again, he was this bigger than life Vegas character, but at the very root of it all, he was a gambler. Like we talk about degenerate gambler. This guy would put it all on the line to make things work, to kind of go for the big score, go for the win. And the Stratosphere really was the big score for him. He put it all on the line. There's absolutely no doubt that he put everything he could into making the Stratosphere, his vision, bringing that into the reality. So when you walked into Vegas World, they used to have that display. I remember it very clearly. He was trying to raise money from individuals. So kind of like you were able to pre-buy a timeshare and you made an investment. And so he would get enough of these and he would be able to fund building the Strat. And it was great on paper. I mean, he had the mock-up of what the tower was going to look like and all the activity. And by the way, the tower was supposed to be a lot taller than it is now. And in fact, the aviation department determined that, it can only be that high. That's all they gave him room. At one point, he even had an idea to have a roller coaster going around the Stratosphere. And another one was King Kong. There was a ride you were going to get into King Kong and ride King Kong up to the top. He was a showman and he was like a carnival barker. And he was always promoting sort of the idea of Vegas and gambling just by his very nature. And so it goes to, along with the whole, legend of Bob Stupak comes the story of him making one of the biggest bets, or arguably the biggest bet at the time. So no one that I know of knows of a bigger bet that was made before him. At the time, that was the biggest bet. Since then, I believe there have been some bigger bets. But at the time, so picture this, it's 1989. It's the Super Bowl, and the Bengals and the 49ers are going to head-to-head. The 49ers are favored to win by at least 7 points. So the Bengals are getting 7 points. So if you bet the Bengals, you start the game +7. Bob Stupak calls all over towns trying to make a big bet. He wants to bet the Bengals. He feels like the Bengals is going to cover the spread, by the way. So which means that this 49ers are going to win by less than 7. And so no one wants to take his action because he wants to put a big ass bet. So they're like, no, sorry, Bob, you're going to have to go somewhere else. So ultimately, he calls a little hole-in-the-wall casino run by this guy named G. Madej, and who's famous, by the way, for taking some of the biggest action in town at the time. And Little Caesars is in this strip mall where Paris is now. This little strip mall is Little Caesars, and by the time I get to Vegas in the 90s, it's known for quarter crapless craps, which was Bob Stupak's game, right? It's also known for taking really big bets. The sportsbook was legendary. They had guys there that would set up the lines for the bets, and they were famous. And so there was this bank of phones outside, which, by the way, a friend of mine, Tommy, used to service. But these phones, this bank of phones used to make a ton of money. So these bookies and stuff would get on these phones and call back the lines to like all over the country. They would either take bets or call back the bets, whatever the case was. They were just in play all the time, right? Anyway, so this guy, Gene, says, come on down, Bob, right? Come on down and, we'll take your bet. So in comes Bob Stupak with 2 suitcases of cash, $1 million he puts on the Bengals to win. The story that I originally heard was that the casino was actually owned at the time by Michael Gaughan, and that he made this bet at a different casino, Little Caesars, that is. That it wasn't, Stupak didn't go into Little Caesars directly to make the bet, that he made the bet somewhere else. And when he won the $1 million, Gaughan didn't want to pay the bet, so he offered Stupak the actual Little Caesars casino in lieu of the payment. Now that turns out not to be true, right? But the legend persists in that Bob Stupak walks into Little Caesars, little dive joint with quarter craps, a sports book, goes in, sees the owner, and then the owner hooks him up at this $1 million bet, right? And he wins. The 49ers won by 4 points, not 7. The actual bet was $1,050,000 to win $1 million. So he gets back his $1,050,000 plus $1 million. And so because Gene took his bet, and of course he won a ton of money, Bob returned with this car that used to sit outside, this like 3-wheeled car that used to sit outside of Little Caesars. And it was sort of, recognition of this big bet and this big payday and this big risk that Gene took to take on Bob Stupak's bet. And for the longest time, that bet persisted as the biggest single bet ever booked by a sportsbook. Now, there are people that go around and they'll bet like 100,000, 200,000, and they'll skip around to a whole bunch of casinos that'll take their action, right? Because they got to split it up. This is the legend of Vegas. These were like 2 guys who were, at their very core, were gamblers, and they were willing to just go all in and take the risk. And this is sort of an urban legend of Vegas. And this is the truth of it. So if you can look it up yourself, it's a 1989 Super Bowl, and it's Bob Stupak's bet on the Bengals to win. Or on the Bengals plus 7. And so this was the bet that paid off. But an urban legend in its own right here in Vegas. Urban legend number 2, in fact, is a sort of a famous house. It's not all that well known now. The whole area has been sort of evolved, I should say.
Go back, I want to be monkey!
On my way to work here, I go by MLK, Martin Luther King Boulevard, and it runs sort of parallel to the 15 for a little while. And there's now like this firehouse built and other stuff. So on the other side of this fire engine, right on MLK, sits the La Palazzo house. Or La Palazzo Mansion, if you want to call it a mansion. It's a pretty big house. I think it's like 3,000 to 4,000 square feet, but it's mostly famous for the fact that, so back in the day, it was built sometime in the early 60s, late 50s, something like this. And that whole area of Vegas, what they call Old Vegas, by the way, well, back in the day, it was a lot of mobsters, right? A lot of mobsters who are here in town. So La Palazzo Mansion is well known as sort of the house where a lot of people met their end. Like if you didn't do right by the bosses, or you were involved in the mob and you had to be disciplined, or you had to dig your own hole quite literally, this is where it took place. And the rumor goes that there's also lots of like hidden doorways and hidden tunnels or basements that haven't been found yet. And so the place has had a reputation for being either haunted or like, these intermittent blood streaks that show up throughout the house. It's hard to kind of figure out who exactly owns the house because it was associated, as this mob house, right? So I don't think, a lot of people didn't want to take credit for the house because, if you find a body in the house, you don't want to be like, hey, that's my house over there, those are my bodies, that kind of thing. So no one really knows, who the house was, other than the fact that there was some screaming going on from the house, and then maybe like a gunshot or 2 every now and then. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, these things happen. So ultimately, the mystery of the house has persisted. It's been on the market off and on, and so it exists here in Vegas as an urban legend. No one's really sure. Like even now, I was trying to look up, okay, who owns the house, because it was listed for sale, and of course the realtor had like, for those of you who like the macabre type of things or want to put a footnote on your house and have tourists show up outside and sell some lemonade, and then maybe some drawings of bloody architect and things like this. I mean, there's that, right? Yeah, it was hard to find out like who actually owns it or what it's worth, the details of the house. There's a lot of mystery that surrounds this house. So there you go. That's urban legend number 2, the La Palazzo Mansion. Okay. The last urban legend is that I'm going to go into is sort of the Area 51. I want to touch on this for a little bit and just give you the perspective of what I have heard over the years, right? So, of course, you have Area 51, and everybody knows now that it's pretty much like a testing area. It's north of Las Vegas, and supposedly there might be some aliens living there that we abducted, or maybe the Roswell incident. They bust the aliens over there. Apparently, I mean, no one's really sure what's going on, but we know that if you've served at Nellis, or you visited Nellis, or you live around Nellis, there's some really strange aircraft sometimes you'll see, and some noises going above. And so what we've learned over the years, those of us that live here, is that there's a lot of testing that goes on in that area. And there's a big area where the planes will test. It's like half of Nevada is basically dedicated to testing airplanes and technology and this kind of thing. Okay. Strangely enough, I used to live in an area of town where every day this unmarked white van used to pick up a bunch of civilians standing on the side of the road. And so at the time I was on a bike. And then every now and then I would actually rollerblade. And these people were literally like, you go to a bus stop, right? And every now and then you'll see people talking to each other, or somebody's having a cigarette. Something is going on that makes it look like there are humans on the planet, right? I mean, you could tell, okay, this is a bus stop. These are regular people getting ready for work and dealing with whatever. Some guy's yelling at the car. Another guy is standing in the middle of the street trying to see where the bus is coming. Not at this stop. This stop was literally freaky deaky, okay? So you go by this place every day. There was literally the 8 of the neatest people you'll ever see, just standing completely in, I wouldn't say formation, because they wouldn't be in parade rest or this kind of thing, for the military, but there was never any talking. No one was chewing gum. There was no smoking. They were all dressed very plainly and stoically. And then there was a minute where I thought, oh my God, they must be getting ready for church. These are people going to church. But of course, not every day of the week. Apparently, huge churchgoers every day of the week standing out there waiting for the church bus to come. And a friend of mine was always like, oh no, they work in Area 51. Those are special. They're special. And I'm like, well, I don't understand. What do you mean by special? Where what goes? It's well, the bus comes and picks them up and takes them away, and nobody knows where. They go from one place and they transfer somewhere, and then they go to another place and they transfer so that no one can follow them, but no one knows quite, where they go, this kind of thing. Every day I would pass this group of people. And by the way, this was literally at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was really early in the morning. I'd have to, because if I was on blades or a bike, I would have to get up really early in the morning. This was sort of early in my career here in Vegas, and it was a long trip. My first bike ride to work was something like 18 miles, so I had to literally leave very, very early in the morning to get to my day shift. So it was 5 o'clock in the morning, and my day shift started at 8, something like this. And I just always found it so weird that these people were just standing there on the side of the road. Everybody's wearing plaid, or solid colors, and for the sake of not wearing anything distinguishing, they looked very distinguished. It's like those cops that try to the FBI agents or the men in black. They try to pretend they're undercover, but everybody knows they're not undercover because they're wearing something that no one ever would wear normally. And this was these guys. They would just be standing around. Yeah, it was very weird. I mean, just so weird. Even think about it today, because my friend would be like, yeah, they're going up to Area 51, but I'm like, dude, I don't understand. I mean, they're still humans, right? They're still actual people. I mean, and this is back when, back then people smoked and chewed gum and, what I mean? But they didn't sit. There was no place to sit. They just stood there, all squared off, ready to go wherever the hell they were going. Anyways, I never saw them dropped off, by the way. I don't know how the hell they got dropped off. Maybe they were just ejected somewhere or made into other types of humans. I don't know. It's just it was like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You remember that? That's what it reminded me of a little bit. It was very, very strange. They all seemed about the same age too, which I always thought was odd. No, none of them had any facial hair, although maybe one of them had facial hair. But anyways, all right, so there you go. There's my 3 urban legends for today. By the way, we got tons of them. Not all of them are scary or hoaxy or that kind of thing. I mean, who wants to see ghosts everywhere? We want to know what the legends that made Vegas. I know for some of you have asked me okay, where about Steve Wynn and some of these people that played a role. Milken, all these people that played a role, but we'll get to those. Those are legends too. They helped build Vegas. But anyways, thank you very much, guys. Take care, and I'll see you later. Bye.